Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. David Orman, and welcome to another episode of the Wellness Shot for the week of March 30th. And today's topic is going to be about hopelessness. And I purposely picked this one because over the course of the last week, I had about 3 or 4 patients use that word. And if it was, if somebody used it once, you think, but when it was 3 or 4 times, I thought it was a bit peculiar. And I'm not sure of the reason for the pattern, but there is definitely a pattern. And hopelessness, at least as I see it, is a little bit different than depression. Depression, I would say, is a longer, for most people, is a longer term process. And it's a once the sinking occurs, there's a bounce or up and down of it, but there's a steadiness to it, so to speak. It's a low steadiness, whereas hopelessness feels much more acute. Again, I'm painting broad pictures here, much more acute, and there's a continual sinking as if I am not seeing any options, so I drop lower, and there are no options on this level, so I drop lower, et cetera, et cetera. And there are a number of reasons for that. Some of them are biochemical, some of them are energetic. For depression, for example, I think 75% of it, as I did on a prior video, 75% of it is not depression, but repression, as in I want to be doing something else but I can't because fill in the blank. I can't find anything else. I have responsibility with family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Hopelessness is there's just everything, there doesn't seem to be any options no matter where I look, either internally or externally. And to me, there's a lot of an energetic component to it as well as a potential biochemical. So let's start at the top. When a person doesn't see options, there's a visual component, even if it's just a metaphorical or energetic visual. When that is the case, always, 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 always the liver. The liver is responsible for a good 300 processes, and that number may be higher. But one of the things in natural medicine that is responsible for is vision. Vision not only is, oh, I'm having a hard time reading that, but vision is, I do not see much hope. I do not see, nothing is clear. Every time I look, all I see is gray. There's no color in my life. That type of vision. Maybe emotional vision is a way of describing it. And that usually comes from one of two things. Either there's a biochemical issue in the brain or there's an exhaustion. And I'm saying two things, but think of the first part as half the circle and the second part as the other half of the circle. So when there is constant exhaustion, as in insomnia, worry about, I don't know, work, worry about family, worry about this, worry about that, pushing harder and not finding anything, pushing 3 times as hard and not finding anything, and then 5 times, et cetera, et cetera. That constant stress, that constant strain will cause a depletion, not only of the adrenal glands and eventually the heart, but also the brain. The brain requires specific chemicals and it needs to be in balance. And when that constant level of stress occurs, you have that imbalance. Fortunately, there are a number of very, very good things that can help to bring them back into balance. At the top of the list is one called St. John's wort. St. John's wort supports the major chemicals that have a tendency to be worn out from nerves, from stress, from strain, from exhaustion, specifically serotonin, dopamine, and just the overall balance of the nervous system. In natural medicine, we would look at it as a balance of the yin and the yang. So the yin is the quiet, the calm. The yin would be the structure. Yang is active and lively. Yang would be the movement. When there's so much yang going on, it fries the yin, it drains the yin. And the yin is what keeps us alive. The yin is what keeps us steady, centered, grounded. No matter what is going on in the world, I have the yin. I can figure this out. There's always hope, that type of idea. When that yin portion is drained. That's hopelessness is one of the common results. In fact, it's probably the most common. St. John's wort, among other things, is one that will help to rekindle that one's zest for life, one's balance for life. It will help one see options and possibilities and a brighter future. A person will find themselves saying those particular phrases, either in their internal dialogue or externally. As a nice side effect, side benefit from St. John's wort, it will help to elevate the immune system quite well. It's one of the stronger antivirals in the natural medicine cabinet. So only good can come from that. This herb also helps, how would I say this? There's the spirit, the part of us that when the body's 100 years old, the spirit goes on to wherever it goes on to. Sometimes it feels as if the spirit is worn out or detached. In other words, my body's here. I don't know what. I can't think that far ahead, or I can't imagine a solution to this. Nobody is helping me. I pray and nobody seems to be listening here. That type of idea, almost a detachment between the body and the spirit. This helps to uh, recognize that, number one, it's never separated. No matter how frustrated we get, no matter how depressed or angry we get, it's never separated. Now, there are times we don't see it. That's the human part, but it is always that oneness. This helps to reclaim our vision, our sense, our feeling of that oneness, and provides hope. Hope has two parts to it. Hope as in, I hope I win the lottery. That's not the hope we're looking for. Hope as in, you know what, I'm going through a rough patch now. And I hope I have hope. In other words, there's an assuredness that this too shall pass. That level of hope. St. John's wort helps to rekindle that type of hope. I don't know. I would call that the plus side of hope versus the I wish I hope I win the lottery is kind of the negative side of hope. That's more of a gamble, uh, frantic panic type of hope, which is not really hope. The second substance is called rhodiola. Rhodiola is a fantastic herb. It is a Russian herb, European herb, and it is excellent for rebuilding and regenerating the thyroid gland and in particular the adrenal glands. And when the adrenals and the thyroid have been overworked from overwork, over worry, over stress, lack of sleep, poor diet, too much exercise, not enough exercise, the heart has to work 2 or 3 or 4 times as hard as it normally would, which it can typically do. But after a period of time, that's when the exhaustion really comes into play. And you know it when 1 or 2 nights of sleep, really good, solid nights of sleep, doesn't seem to have that much of an impact. A little bit, but not as much as it should. That's when the difference between I'm tired and fatigued versus exhaustion. Rhodiola will help to bring back the energy, bring back the balance, strengthen the adrenals, strengthen the heart and the thyroid, and then that exhaustion has a tendency to dissipate. There are also a couple of a broad range of substances called Bach, B-A-C-H, flower remedies. Edward Bach was a physician, I want to say in the 30s and 40s from England, and he took an ancient principle that went back 4 or 5 thousand years that basically said all emotion equals disease, or stuck emotion equals disease, or all disease is a result of an imbalance of emotion. In other words, disease, emotion, they're connected one way or another. And so he and volunteers would purposely get himself sick. And out of that came 37 different remedies. And they either have a word or a phrase that is associated with them. So, worry from unknown cause, fear from known cause, obsessive thinking, etc., etc. And you pick one or two. The literature says you can go up to six, but I have found tapping it at two different remedies would be the ideal. You want to give the body a very clear message. We need help here and we need help here. Once that's resolved, anything that is lingering will address it. Specifically for hopelessness, there are two of them. One of them is called Gorse, Gorse. Gorse is the Bach remedy that is pinpoint specific when a person feels that they are out of hope. They have no hope. The situation is hopeless. Everything is dark. There isn't a shred of light. That type of feel. I'm purposely using those phrases to distinguish from depressed. Take a couple of drops either under the tongue. You could put them in water and sip on them. Now, Bach remedies are kind of interesting in that they don't work very quickly, very pronounced. So in other words, it's not like a pharmaceutical where you take something and 20 or 30 minutes later you're a zombie or something. Or you take an aspirin and half hour later your headache's gone. It's one of these things where you feel XYZ in the morning and throughout the day you kind of check in and you feel I sort of feel the same way, and at the end of the day it's well, I feel a little bit better, and then you wake up, yeah, I feel a little bit better, and 3 days later I'm back to being me, or 5 days later, whatever the case may be. What I have found is typically within that 48 to 72 hour mark is when the major uptick begins to occur. So with hopelessness, gorse is the oh, it is the antidote. I've used it myself. I've used it with tons of patients. I've used it with animals. And if it works with animals, you know it's not just a placebo by any stretch. Uh, when there's hopelessness, sometimes too, there is the lack of or fear of lack of security. The issue of security is kind of the framework for hopelessness, and when you could dismantle or perhaps strengthen the framework would be a better choice, you find that hopelessness dissipates. The substance for that framework for uh, security would be the best word, is called Mimulus, and it's spelled Mimulus. Mimulus is excellent when there is a fear from lack of security, or it feels as if there's no steady ground underneath, where you have a job and you hear rumors that they're going to close, or I don't know if we're going to have enough to pay for rent or mortgage, or we're going to have to live somewhere else, or we got to move. I don't know if we can. That whole hamster wheel brain thing starts to go on. The combination of gorse and mimulus are fantastic. You can put both of them, like I said, under the tongue twice a day or in a glass of water with sip on it. Under the tongue typically works a little bit quicker, and in the water typically works a little bit deeper. There may be instances where it gets a little bit worse before it gets better. Nothing dramatic, but oh, this is not only is this not working, but I think I feel worse. As weird as this may sound, that's a great sign. Your system is changing and it's acclimating and it's adjusting so that the genuine you, the inspired you comes into play, the balanced you comes into play. Last but not least, of course, the answer to a lot of problems is movement. And the Bagua course that I have, Qigong, they're all fantastic. Stagnation equals problems, problems including psychological, emotional, physical. When you get stuck to be movement, when you get lakes to become rivers, that's when the best version of you, of anybody, comes to fruition. If you have questions, please write them below. I read everything. And I would love a favor if you would both like and subscribe to my channel. I greatly appreciate it. I will see you next week. Thank you for listening.